Welcome to The Explainer. So usually we focus a ton on daytime health habits, right? What we're eating, how we're moving, how we manage our stress. But today, we're actually unpacking the hidden, absolutely critical biological events that kick off the second the lights go out. We call it the midnight vulnerability. Let's dive right into what's literally happening inside your body while you sleep.
Okay, to really grasp this, we've got to start with a bit of a biological mystery, centered around a very specific time frame, 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. The oncology literature points to this 4-hour block as way more than just a time for rest. It's a highly critical period for cellular activity. So what exactly is happening in the dead of night that makes those hours so vital?
Well, the core premise we're looking at is honestly pretty striking. According to Dr. Becker's analysis of independent research, cancer cells actually multiply faster in this exact 4-hour window than at any other point in the entire 24-hour cycle. And the source material makes it abundantly clear. This isn't just a fun theory, it is a strictly documented biological pattern. Our goal today is to map out exactly how this whole thing works.
Section 1. The Midnight Danger Window.
The absolutely crucial starting point here is understanding a healthy cell's security system, which relies on a process called apoptosis. Whenever a mitochondrion detects damage inside the cell, like DNA errors or some kind of metabolic dysfunction, it signals that cell to stop dividing and essentially destroy itself. It's the body's built-in self-cleaning function, keeping damaged cells from ever replicating.
Think of it like a really strict factory manager. When an error pops up on the assembly line, that manager immediately hits the stop button before a defect or product can ship out. Quality is maintained. Cancer cells, though, they are essentially defective machines where this manager is permanently out to lunch. The stop signal never fires, and the damaged cell just keeps replicating that exact same error over and over and over again.
Section 2. The Melatonin-Mitochondria Axis.
So you might be wondering, what actually powers that strict factory manager? The answer, according to the circadian oncology literature, is melatonin. But wait, not the drugstore sleep aid you're probably picturing. We're talking about the biological melatonin naturally produced by your pineal gland, which goes directly into your mitochondria. It protects the cell in 3 ways. It acts like a fire suppressant against reactive oxygen species, activates vital survival pathways, and maintains the mitochondrial membrane potential, which is basically the electrical charge needed for quality control. But here's the major catch. After age 60, the pineal gland often calcifies, and your natural melatonin output can plummet by a massive 60 to 70%.
And this ties right into an essential piece of the puzzle known as the Warburg Effect. Think of a healthy cell like a sleek, modern car getting an easy 40 miles per gallon. Super efficient. A cancer cell, on the other hand, runs on a radically inefficient pathway called glycolysis. It's kind of like an old 1965 engine getting maybe 2 miles to the gallon. Because it's so inefficient, it's incredibly hungry. It requires massive amounts of glucose, especially at night, just to survive and multiply.
Now, to truly grasp the gravity of this, we need to think about the sheer scale of human biology. 3.8 million. That's the number of cells that divide in an adult body every single second. Which leads us to a highly provocative question. With millions of divisions happening every single second, how many of those are going to happen entirely unsupervised tonight? Because if your melatonin drops drastically as you age, the watchman is effectively absent. You're leaving the factory completely unmonitored during those critical overnight hours.
Section 3. Fueling the Nighttime Fire.
Dr. Becker actually maps out this 6-stage biological cascade, and it's basically a perfect storm. It starts upstream. The pineal gland calcifies, which drops your melatonin. That causes the mitochondrial membrane potential to drop, meaning quality control totally falters. The apoptosis stop signal fails. Then, a new variable enters the mix, dysregulated nocturnal cortisol, which spikes your blood glucose. Those hungry cancer cells running on that wildly inefficient Warburg effect eagerly consume the glucose surge. And the result? Unchecked cell division, right in that vulnerable 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. window. It's a silent, precise chain reaction.
Section 4. The Case of Robert.
Let's ground this with a real-world example from the source material. Meet Robert. He's a 62-year-old retired engineer and an early-stage prostate cancer survivor. Now, Robert was technically in remission, but he found himself constantly waking up at 2 a.m. Like a true engineer, he started tracking his data meticulously. For over a year, he was just pulling levers at random, teas, supplements, blue light glasses, with zero luck. Eventually, an oncology researcher looked at his logs and tested his nighttime cortisol, and boom, it was highly elevated. Robert didn't just have a generic sleep problem, he had a nocturnal mitochondria vulnerability, completely triggered by his late eating habits. After starting a very precise intervention, his cortisol normalized, his sleep improved, and his markers remained undetectable.
Now, the literature suggests you can actually look for signs of this in your own body using 2 quick 60-second self-tests. First up is the temporal pulse test. Just feel the side of your forehead for a firm, high-resistance pulse. That indicates an elevated sympathetic tone, which keeps your nocturnal cortisol dangerously high. Second is the 9 p.m. drowsiness test. At 10 or 11 p.m., do you feel sharply alert, or do you feel heavy, warm, and drowsy? If you're wired late at night, it's a strong behavioral marker that your melatonin onset, and therefore your mitochondrial protection window, is severely delayed.
Let's contrast 2 totally different nightly routines for the exact same 65-year-old guy to see how timing alters cellular biology. Look at version A. He eats late, around 8:30 p.m., has a glass of wine, keeps bright LED lights on, and sleeps in a warm 72-degree room. The result? Cortisol stays elevated and his mitochondria are completely unsupervised. Now version B. He has an early dinner at 6:30, uses warm, dim lamps, and cools the bedroom down to 66 degrees. Suddenly, his cortisol is naturally suppressed, his melatonin rises, and his mitochondria are fully supervised. The only difference here? Timing and a few really deliberate environmental tweaks.
Section 5. The Mitochondrial Night Reset Protocol.
Okay, before we get into the exact steps, we've got to talk about one more biological function, mitophagy. This is the cell's way of breaking down and recycling damaged mitochondria, and it's driven by a little energy sensor called AMPK. The main takeaway from the research here is that eating within 3 hours of bed totally suppresses this AMPK signal. Basically, if you eat late, you are sending the cellular cleanup crew home long before they can actually mop the floors.
So here's the actual lifestyle and dietary protocol. And honestly, the absolute biggest game changer here is stopping all calorie intake 3 hours before sleep. You have to let that cleanup crew do their job. It also means dimming your overhead lights by about 75% an hour and a half before bed and dropping that bedroom temp to between 65 and 68 degrees. Diet-wise, throwing things like tart cherries, walnuts, or fatty fish into your dinner gives you great natural melatonin support. And, this is huge, avoid evening alcohol. Even just one single drink can drop your natural melatonin production by around 20%.
Now, for those needing a bit more targeted mitochondrial support, the literature lays out a very specific sequence. First up is melatonin at a slightly higher dose of 5 to 10 milligrams taken exactly at bedtime. This is specifically to replace the deficiency caused by an aging pineal gland. Next, CoQ10, specifically the ubiquinol form, taken with your last meal to help with oxidative defense. And finally, 300 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate, taken 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Why? Because it has a documented ability to dampen that dangerous nocturnal cortisol spike.
Now, I want to be super clear about some medical red flags explicitly mentioned in the source material. If you're experiencing unexplained weight loss of 10 or more pounds in 3 months, deep, persistent bone pain, a sudden and profound drop in your energy levels, or drenching night sweats, these are structural signals. This is absolutely not the time for behavioral tweaks or supplements, okay? These specific symptoms require immediate medical evaluation by a physician.
So that brings us to the end of today's explainer. Based on everything we've looked at, from the calcifying pineal gland to the Warburg Effect to that incredibly crucial window from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., you really have to ask yourself, are you actively protecting your midnight biology, or are you leaving your cellular factory totally unguarded? The science gives us the blueprint, but the next step is completely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.